Hi, welcome to our second art talk. We're coming to you live with probably a small delay from our Gallery Edit in Richmond, Virginia. Gallery Edit is a project of Hillside Missions and World Horizons, two international mission organizations that are working to introduce unreached peoples around the world to Jesus. And the art gallery is one of the ways that we one of our projects, and also one of two galleries, our other one being in India. So this art talk is the second in a series that we'll be broadcasting. And the purpose of these art talks is really for us as an art team and as a staff to dig in a little bit deeper to some of the philosophical and theological thoughts behind art. And we're not experts, and this is very much a learning process and a conversation between us, and we hope that you'll join us with your questions. You can tweet them to us at Reach the Nations on Twitter. We can also, yeah, I guess that's the best way, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is our second art talk. The first time, if you joined us last time, we used Francis Schaeffer's essays, Art in the Bible. For our second book, we made kind of a bold choice to look at Leo Tolstoy's What is Art? And it has been very interesting and dense and a little bit more difficult to get through. So I think it's gonna be fun as we kind of stumble through a little bit some of his definitions and his ratings. We are by no means experts in the history or philosophy of art, but we have learned a lot in running a gallery here in Richmond, and kind of being having this as having a gallery as a project of mission has taught us a lot. And so we do have some things to say about our own gallery and our mission here, but we're very much students of what we'll be talking about and learning. So thanks for being with us, and I'll turn it over to Jenny to start us off with some questions.
Sure. So I guess to give you guys some background, but also kind of get our sort of conversation started, we wanted to sort of ask our first question, which is, what is art according to Tolstoy from the reading we did?
So Tolstoy, the title of his book is What is Art? And he has a very long, well thought out lead up to that. But ultimately, in chapter 12, he gets to his vision of art. And the essential part of it is art is the transmission to others of a special feeling experienced by the artist. So according to Tolstoy, art must communicate a feeling to the viewer that the artist is feeling. And he goes further to say that good art to him involves original content, authentic feeling, and a message that has high moral values.
Yeah, so that's super interesting because not everybody agrees with that. So it needs to, according to him, it needs to have some sort of like good intention. And like elsewhere, he says like, even for like the Greeks he mentioned, like art was only good when it portrayed beauty. And so like that's definitely challenged today, which I think is kind of interesting. So he focuses on the experience, which I thought was also really cool. Another place he defines art as an infectious communication of emotions, which is basically what you just said. So how does art influence society according to Tolstoy?
Tolstoy really focuses on the idea that true art would have a positive moral effect on society and encourage better morals for anyone who encounters it. And I think he also really focuses on the idea that true art would stem from like the greater religious feeling of an age. So whatever religion most people follow, like the Nazis follow, the true art would stem from those religious feelings, and that would be the highest form of art. And so as a result, better morals would become manifest in the society.
And also interesting, he took a lot of issue with the high church culture of the day, who was, I guess, spiritually responsible for producing a lot of art. He kind of railed against that and would talk a lot about how he preferred art that came from like a lower caste. Like he seemed to just love art that came from the peasant, like the working class people. So that was like, was kind of an interesting thing about him.
Yeah, I think he preferred the peasant art because he saw it as like more morally pure. So he saw upper class art as being like really frivolous and just like celebrating kind of indulgence and personal enjoyment, not really pointing to any greater moral truth. But he didn't see that same like level of frivolity and like indulgence in peasant art. And he saw it as communicating like more authentic feelings.
But a lot of that was like the art they were creating was sometimes often functional too, and he like really was interested in that aspect. So like we have a question here: is art only good if it's useful? I don't think so, but what do you think? Okay.
So the question is the utility of art, and if art is only good if it's useful. Jean says that she doesn't agree with that. So what do you think? Why?
I don't know, especially like as someone who just graduated from like a craft background, like functionality is something that's often like really celebrated in that. But then like a painting, I guess it is kind of interesting because all art does have a use in a sense that like appreciation, like, you know, if it's gave you a good feeling when you looked at it, like it was used for pleasure. So I guess it does have a use technically, like everything does. But I was thinking more like, does it perform a task or is it, I don't know. So that's another interesting point, I guess, because it's like all art I think is useful to some degree.
Yeah, I think it can be useful, but not necessarily utilitarian. So look at fashion. Like for your clothes to be useful, they have to cover you. But being pretty isn't useful. In fact, sometimes something that looks fashionable can be an inconvenience because it's more expensive, it takes longer to make, it takes longer to put on, but there's beauty in intricacy, there's beauty in creating art out of something, not merely designing it for a function.
Right.
So.
And the question of utility is something that we encounter kind of often as a ministry that is using a gallery as a way to connect people to Jesus. It can be and introduce them sometimes for the first time to Jesus. It can be a little bit tricky because we don't want to end up having a relationship with art where we're only interested in it if it's useful or if it's a tool. So we really try not to talk about art that way and really not think about art that way because it seems to, I think it takes some value away from just the even like initial purpose.
Yeah, like a raw expression, like especially in the mindset of an artist, like you don't always have to consider, like I don't think I work this way, but like a lot of artists don't consider the audience feelings whatsoever. So they just want to make to get out feelings or thoughts or like the method is just like who they are, or I don't know how to like say it, but it's just sort of visceral instead of like considering like what someone will look like in this garment. I just want to make this garment. So that's an interesting sort of thing as well.
Yeah, and the relationship between art.
I don't know.
Oh, we just heard that we're
Mic difficulties.
having trouble being heard, so maybe we'll just get a little bit closer.
Yeah. Okay.
And also shout.
Take a seat, John. We're gonna get cozy.
Okay.
Hopefully you can hear us now.
Try to make this green bar go to the top. Shout.
Okay.
Okay, so we're talking about the relationship between art and the viewer and the artist, and Jenny was just saying that in her experience as a student, some of like her classmates didn't think about the audience at all or who would be viewing their art, but just created for kind of their own like release and their own expression of what they were feeling or thinking. And Tolstoy talks about one of the primary reasons for good, or one of the primary definitions of good art being art that communicates. So art that will basically say something to its viewer, and that there's sort of there's a connection between the piece of art that's being viewed and the person who is viewing it.
He also really values sincerity in art. Just values like someone who makes art for themselves to get out an emotion rather than thinking about how that art will be viewed.
And it's something like, I don't think that view is flawed, but art is meant to be like, well, not always, but if your art intends to be eventually viewed, like the audience needs to be a consideration, or will be viewing it. So that's something that, like, even though they don't think about it when they're making, like, an audience looking at their work is going to happen. So it is still a thing, even if they don't want to like consider it, I guess. So that's still something they would have to consider. I don't know. So that's kind of confusing. So Susie started to touch on it a little bit. So like here, what is our like gallery edits view of art?
Well, we're a very specific gallery in that we exist to introduce people to Jesus. We want people all over the world to have a chance to hear the gospel, and the gallery here serves as kind of a model, and for our friends and colleagues who are living and working in places where there is no access to Christian community. And so the gallery might be a way that somebody hears about Jesus for the first time. So we're a different kind of gallery, I'd say, than many in this area. And our purposes and our goals are different in that they're not to make money. We don't take a commission from our artists, which I think is really different. And we also only feature Christian artists, which raises a lot of questions, and I think is maybe a good way to delve into some of the other topics that we wanted to talk about in terms of like what art, good and bad art, and art that we take and art that we say no to. So maybe Katie, do you want to talk about what it's like being a Christian gallery? And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very different than our neighbors. We're in the Arts District of Richmond, and seeing reactions as people come into the gallery, then it's more of a stark like reaction, which is good. Like it creates that platform for communication, I think. But it's a very cool and it's a very like exciting place to be, I think, in order to create that bridge for communication with people, and then also just appreciating art, but like in a different sense, because we're very much about making art in order like to glorify God and to recognize like beauty and, I mean, also pain, but also all of that in reflection to God. So.
And it's not like, I think like, not pushback, but like the thing that some people are like, wait, why? About just accepting Christian artists. It's not to be discriminatory. It's for like, I guess in the arts community, Christianity's sort of lately been difficult. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, this is an opportunity more than like a discriminatory sort of place. Like, this is a place for Christian artists to finally have like a home that they can truly display like what their art is like made for, which is Jesus. So it's kind of more of an outlet. Not that to say that Christian artists can't be themselves and display, you know, their Christianity elsewhere. It's just, this is a place where our mission is to utilize that sort of expression of their faith to reach out to others. Because this is meant to be like first and foremost an outreach sort of place, and to have a commonality of like art and appreciation for art definitely gets conversations rolling. So how do we like define good and bad art as far as like edit goes? Like, how do we accept and decline artists? I guess is something we should address.
We're having a lot of, in leading up to this podcast, we're having some good conversation about good and bad art and just what our kind of individual takes on it are. You know, do we think that there's such thing as bad art? You know, is all art good in some way? And then kind of landing at a place of saying, well, whatever the case may be, when you have a gallery like we do, you do end up deciding that some art is good and some art is not. And so for us, some art we say no to because we know that it won't be interesting to our viewers given our demographic, or we think maybe the artist is just like needs more time to develop their craft. You know, maybe they're kind of young or still kind of finding their style. And then some we just plainly don't like, and so our personality comes into it. But then the first thing that we look at, because of some of the stuff that we've already mentioned, is the artists themselves. So we want to know about the artist and why they create, and if they're Christian, and if they're making their art like as an extension and as an expression of their faith. That's the first thing we want to know, and then we can look at like quality and content and all of those other aesthetic things.
I know it's another thing we've come across, but like, how do you feel about the overtly Christian religious art? I know we've come across a few of those.
So do you mean like praying hands and doves
and Jesus on the cross? Yeah.
I don't,
There's a place for it.
Yeah, totally.
yeah, but I think that it is hard to make that accessible for a lot of people, because sometimes it's easy for someone to look at that and glance over it and be like, okay, let's do this on the cross. Whatever, I saw that in our history class, I've seen that in museums, and it doesn't spark any new sort of interactions or any new interpretations, or it's just so familiar from a certain setting that people feel like, okay, there's no way I can relate to this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's probably good to clarify that when we say that we show the work of Christian artists, we don't strictly accept or have any rules that say the art has to be specifically Christian, like in terms of theme and content. I mean, right now we've got a show from a Richmond photographer, Matt Helms, and his work is behind us, and there's lots of beautiful shots from like people and places around the city. And so no overtly like religious symbols, but Christian work because he is Christian.
And the point, I guess, for this show, as an example, like looking at this, nobody's like, oh, like Jesus is he, like, but the part that like kind of sets us apart and still draws our message to an audience member is the statement that we displayed right over there. It's where the artist gets to say, hey, this is why I made what you're looking at, and this is why I'm an artist, and this is who I make art for, which is usually, God. So it's a great way for the artist to kind of unmask what isn't obvious in their art, because they're not pictures of Jesus on the cross or anything like that. So like Katie said, it's a point of access is what we look for in art. Like you don't want it to be something that someone looks at and is just turned off because they've seen it a million times. So I think that's a factor when we're picking art also.
And also, as far as having a variety in content displayed, I think there's some topics that you just can't explore using traditional biblical imagery, like looking at someone's contemporary struggle to relate to God in an urban setting. Like, you can't communicate that with some imagery from the Renaissance. You have to find a new vehicle for that, and you can use like new symbols and new technology, but still be pointing to God with more relatable imagery that says something unique.
Yeah. Did y'all have any more questions about or points that we should bring forth about, how we pick art and what we view as good?
I think it's worth talking about why, if we want to talk about it outside the gallery setting, why is it necessary to differentiate between good and bad art? What's the point outside of merely accepting people into a gallery? Is it worth deciding what is good and bad art when we view it as Christians?
Yeah, because we just talked about our standards, but other galleries have totally different standards.
Yeah, and we don't think that our standards are somehow universal or that every gallery should be using ours. This is just what works for us, but by no means Bible
Right.
for the gallery world.
Yeah. And it's totally arbitrary. Even the whole overarching topic that's, what is art? It's definitely undefinable. But it's definitely opinion-based, quality-based, craftsmanship-based. There's so many factors that differentiate, and there's different types of galleries that accept different types of work. So if you go to a craft gallery and you have a painting, it's probably not gonna fly. But there's places where other works won't be. It's got to be a right fit too. So it's totally an arbitrary thing. What did y'all find from Tolstoy's writing that cleared this up at all for you guys, or made you angry by what he said? Because he's very opinionated.
I think his main point for differentiating between good and bad art, his argument for doing that is that it influences society because art is a form of communicating. And so for written communication, you want to judge what's a good and bad message. So when you view art, it's communicating something to you. So that's why he insists you should try to differentiate, even just as a viewer rather than an organization. I think we may have gotten a question tweeted in.
Yeah. I don't see anything.
I don't know. Do you guys think that as individuals you see a lot, you feel a lot of communication from art that you view?
When it's good.
When it's good.
That's not really a helpful answer, but yeah, I guess if it's something that I like, we can't escape the fact that what we think is good art is art usually that we like. I think it's hard to have an opinion, a strong opinion, positively about art if we don't also think that it's good. sometimes I think maybe I might think a piece of art is bad just because I don't care for the style of it.
Right.
It might be really well made. I just don't like it.
Yeah. And sometimes like you're talking about like the communication part of it. Like if it's, sometimes it's bad to me personally if it's overly communicative. Like if it's just throwing it in my face and it's like I can't have any arbitrary thoughts about like what this is trying to say. Like it's saying it and I don't get a choice in the matter. Like that's also a turn off for me for like good art, I guess. And then that also in that there's like the craftsmanship of something. So like how well it's made for me is something that's like really important. Sorry.
Yeah.
And
also, a lot of times, like for me to like really appreciate work is, know the artist's intent, unless it's very like blatant, but knowing the artist and knowing their thought process and why they made the work, then that is very important. Also, yeah, aesthetically pleasing. Usually I go by that. But yeah, I think that's when I most appreciate it. And that's when I get the most out of a piece.
Dorothy,
And
do you have thoughts? What do you find good art or bad art?
I think it would be really similar to what Katie said, knowing the artist's intent, but then also craftsmanship is a big deal for me. But also, I think I often like art that sort of chronicles the human experience, because I think that it's worth sharing. So like when I create, I like to try and share my experience, and so I think I gravitate toward art that does the same thing.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I'm not an artist, but would you guys say that, like, as all, like, students and creators of art, do you tend to like art that's, like, a similar medium to yours, or very different, or just, like, all over the place? Like, I was wondering if there's a correlation
Yeah, I
between
think
that.
a lot of times then I find myself, I think like major artists, then I draw from them and stuff. But so yeah, a lot of times then I see work and I relate to it because of my work. But then there's also, I mean, I love some like very different stuff than my own work, and I'm inspired by it and like moved by it. So I think that, it's good to not just be limited to what you make, but let yourself be changed, like let yourself be moved by different things.
I wonder if that's kind of part of maybe what makes art good in our eyes, is just the, like, wow, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Or like, I haven't ever done that, so
Because
I couldn't right now make this. So
Yeah.
just that, like, kind of that awe.
Yeah.
For me, even more than that is like, if I can like sit there and look at it and either figure it out or know right away, whenever I can come to the conclusion, like, I know how they did that. Like, that's also a really big, like, wow, I'm really into this because I know, like, I can do these same things as you, but you're doing them awesome. But that is one aspect that I really find like attractive in art, but also like, I think subject matter for me is what's most, because I'm a fan of all like mediums. It's when like I can between like two paintings, like I like paintings, but one that has a more I guess influential like message is what I'll be drawn to more, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of times then when I make my own work, then I limit myself, or I feel like I can only communicate like certain things, but then seeing other artists and how they communicated something, then it's like, oh, this is possible. Like being able to see that, then it just opens up like so many doors as far as like what you can communicate, what you can appreciate, what you can show.
I think we had a question from Twitter, right?
Yeah, the question is, what do you consider a positive reaction to art? I think that's a good question. Personally, and kind of going off on this idea of art as communication, I think a good reaction or a positive reaction to art would be, first off, understanding what a piece of art is communicating, and then, based on the validity of the message, maybe changing your thoughts on a subject or your behaviors based on that message. But I think primarily just understanding what the artist is trying to say and putting in that effort to try and understand is a positive reaction to art.
Also, like, positive. It could be a really, like, dark piece that's with a harsh meaning to where, like, it brings me to tears. But if that was the artist's intent, then that was a positive reaction, I think. So that could be, positive is to, like, directly related to what the artist wants out of it.
I think also a positive reaction to art would be to create as, like, inspired by whatever piece you've seen or whatever art you've seen. Because I know that, like, seeing art that inspires me, like, it makes me want to create, and that's my automatic reaction.
That's a good one. And I guess, I don't know, I'm just coming up with so many questions. So, like, well then, because you just said, what did you say? There's something you said that I was going to ask a question about. Like, it could be, you said you feel inspired to create. It doesn't necessarily have to mean create a piece of art. You could create an idea or be inspired to do something. Like, a lot of art is,
Catalyst for something else.
right, yeah, it makes you want, it's like if it's a graphic image of something awful, you're like, I want to go out and change that, like, or, that's sort of gets into, like, propaganda, and, technically, like, what is art could be a huge range of stuff that doesn't include just paintings and images in a museum or gallery. Like, you could get really, big with that and say, like, actions or, I don't know, thoughts, or, and then you get into, like, written word and stuff like that. It's definitely art as well.
Maybe a good theme for the next art talk. We're just checking to see if we have any other questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think we're just about out of time. Thanks so much to those who. Oh,
Okay, this just
we
in.
have one more.
Tweet that's not showing up on Twitter.
What opportunities exist for artists in mission? What have you connected to? And how would a person listening respond to feel interested when this is talking about?
So you said, what is an artist's responsibility?
No, what are the opportunities for an artist in
Opportunities.
mission?
Okay. What are the opportunities for an artist in mission?
Or somebody who's an artist and interested in mission. So, great question, and we are lucky to have a lot of opportunities if you are this person. Specifically here in Richmond or in a couple of our different fields around the world, there are opportunities to contribute as an artist to galleries that are starting and would love to have your art. We could connect you to these places. There are other organizations that are utilizing galleries as part of their mission. There's also a lot of positions for administrative support. So for those who might be patrons and appreciators of art, but maybe not artists themselves, there are plenty of opportunities for planning and for management and for developing curatorial skills. If you are maybe an art historian or a teacher of art, there are opportunities for art classes and for of all mediums. We have a team in India right now that's just opened our second gallery there, and they do everything from a gallery space very similar to this one to different kinds of dance within the same space, and community events that bring people in. So all of those create a lot of different jobs for a lot of different people with different skills. So if you are interested in learning about any of these, you can tweet us at Reach the Nations. You can also find us at reachthenations.org. If you're local to Richmond, come on by. We'd love to talk to you about our open positions, or if you're just curious to chat more, we're here.
If you do have any further questions after watching this later, you can definitely reach out to us through that website as well.
Any other thoughts? Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.